Hey there, friends. David Lightbringer here because somebody said glass candles, so those are like my favorite. See, I made this one in Photoshop. So yeah, Ryan Condal, House of the Dragon showrunner, recently said that House of the Dragon Season 3 will show us a new thing from book lore that has never been seen on a show before. And although I am embarrassed to say I didn't have a good guess about what that was, a couple of my clever colleagues have figured it out, I think. And the answer may be a Valyrian glass candle, which is very exciting. So hat tip to Dragon Demands, who suggested on his channel the other day that it would be a glass candle. And as soon as he said that, I was like, duh. That's got to be it. Because I have always thought that the Targaryens maintained use of glass candles on Dragonstone after the Doom. So if we see Helaena or somebody else on the show using one, that won't surprise me a bit. It'll be just what I expected. And as I'll show you today, it makes a ton of sense. And then, as it turns out, fellow YouTuber and frequent guest of the channel, Michael Talks About Stuff, actually made a video last summer guessing that Helaena was using a glass candle to enter Daemon's Weirwood dream at the end of Season 2. So if it does turn out to be a glass candle that Ryan is talking about, good job. Michael Talks About Stuff. Looks like you may have gotten that one. I do think it's a very plausible theory, and it could even be that they were planning on giving us a glass candle reveal in one of the last 2 episodes of Season 2, which were, of course, cut and moved to Season 3. So in any case, I love glass candles. Like I said, they're a very cool part of the lore, so I figured I would make a video with all my best glass candle theories, and here we are. So here's what we're going to do today. First, I'm going to show you all the wonderful things that you can do with a Valyrian glass candle. Then I'm going to show you where they have been used for sure in the story, and that would be Quaithe the Shadowbinder and Archmaester Marwyn the Mage, who are both using them in different ways. And most of all, I'm going to give you several theories about glass candles. Number 1, that Daenerys Targaryen will be using one in the Winds of Winter, and I'll tell you how she'll use it and what she'll see. Number 2, that the Targaryens continued to use glass candles on Dragonstone after the Doom, like I said, and specifically that a glass candle helps explain the weird Dornish Letter mystery involving Aegon the Conqueror. Number 3, that Euron Greyjoy has been using glass candles since Book 2, and that he's been using them to corrupt specific people in the story. Number 4, that Lord Leyton Hightower and his daughter Melora the Mad Maid are using a glass candle atop the High Tower, which is nothing new, of course, but I'll give you a new theory about what their plan is. And number 5, that the Cult of Starry Wisdom is using glass candles to enact its agenda all around the world. And I'll also speculate about what that agenda is. And then finally, with another shout out to Michael Talks About Stuff, we'll talk about the enhanced glass candle powers that Martin included in a scrapped draft for A Feast for Crows. Powers that he may still be planning to reveal some version of later in the books. So I have a specific theory about what he might be doing along those lines. So that's what we've got for you today, folks. Hopefully that sounds like fun, and let's get to the video. Alright, so despite being one of the most flagrantly magical things in the entire story, glass candles are actually one of the most modern things, since they are a bit like walkie-talkies or video chat, you might say, with a little internet spying thrown in. But of course, the major inspiration for the glass candles are the Palantiri, the seeing stones from Lord of the Rings, as well as the black obsidian scrying mirrors used by shamans throughout Mesoamerican culture. The basic idea of a dark mirror also kind of just reeks of the occult vibes that George likes to hang on the Targaryens and Valyrians. And that's essentially what the glass candles are. They are sword-shaped black scrying mirrors, or sword-shaped black palantiri if you prefer. Now, A Feast for Crows actually gives us the rare privilege of sitting in on a lecture about the powers of the glass candle from none other than the Archmaester of the Higher Mysteries at the Citadel, Marwyn the Mage. So let's stop doodling in our notebooks and pay attention to the lecture. The only light came from a tall black candle in the center of the room. The candle was unpleasantly bright. There was something queer about it. The flame did not flicker, even when Archmaester Marwin closed the door so hard that papers blew off a nearby table. The light did something strange to colors, too. Whites were bright as fresh fallen snow. Yellow shone like gold. Reds turned to flame, but the shadows were so black they looked like holes in the world. Sam found himself staring. The candle itself was 3 feet tall and slender as a sword, ridged and twisted, glittering black. "Is that obsidian?" said the other man in the room, a pale, fleshy, pasty-faced young fellow with round shoulders, soft hands, close-set eyes, and food stains on his robes. Call it dragonglass. Archmaester Marwyn glanced at the candle for a moment. It burns, but is not consumed. With apologies to the Archmaester, let me just briefly cut in here to say, Sam's hooked and he can't stop staring. Oh, baby. Now, I want to highlight the visual language describing the candle, which Martin is using to tell us quite a bit about it. Sorry, it's early in the video. I know you weren't ready for that. So, burning without being consumed is a clear reference to Moses' burning bush, which burns but is not consumed and speaks to Moses and, of course, gives him divine insight. And George is also referencing the burning bush elsewhere when he describes the weirwood tree as looking like a blaze of flame. So they look like they're burning without being consumed. It's a tree, so it's like a big bush. And as we know, the weirwood trees, just like the burning bush, give divine insight from the gods. Glass candles and weirwood trees are both psychic amplifiers and spy tools and ways of getting ancient knowledge, so they are both symbols of the fire of the gods in the hands of man, if you want to say that. Speaking of the fire of the gods, the candle is sword-shaped, as we just heard, so taken together with its steady, unyielding, piercing flame, the glass candle seems meant to evoke the idea of Lightbringer, the burning sword which brings the dawn and all the rest. Marwyn goes on to mention the prophecy of Azor High Reborn a moment later, as he speaks of traveling to Dany to help her save the world. And as I always love to say, there is little chance that Marwyn is not bringing a glass candle with him. The Citadel has 4 after all, which no one but Marwyn seems to be using, and if you're traveling halfway around the world to help someone save the world, you're going to want to bring your magical walkie-talkies spy mirror thing with you, I'm thinking, and more on this in a moment. And then finally we have the language about the candle's light turning shadows so black that they look like holes in the world. This seems meant to evoke the idea of black holes and portals because the candles can indeed transport consciousness and communication across time and space instantaneously, as Archmaester Marwyn would explain if I would just stop interrupting him. What feeds the flame? Asked Sam. What feeds a dragon's fire? Marwyn seated himself upon a stool. All Valyrian sorcery was rooted in blood or fire. The sorcerers of the Freehold could see across mountains, seas, and deserts with one of these glass candles. They could enter a man's dreams and give him visions, and speak to one another half a world apart, seated before their candles. Do you think that might be useful, Slayer? We would have no more need of ravens. So as you can see, it wasn't only the dragons that gave the Valyrians total supremacy in war over everyone else in the world for 5,000 years. It was also these candles, which gave the Valyrians a kind of instantaneous worldwide communication network when everyone else was sending messages by raven or ship or horseback or even on foot, like the Greek Battle of Marathon. I suspect the best communication happens when there is a glass candle on both ends, because we've seen Quaithe use a candle to communicate to Dany several times, and it always seems kind of limited in clarity and the amount of time that Quaithe is able to spend. Right now, Quaithe is kind of doing all the work to establish the psychic link, right? So it just kind of makes sense. If there was a candle on both sides, then she and Quaithe could probably speak a lot more clearly. As for using the candles to see across mountains and lakes and rivers and deserts and things, it seems that Marwyn himself has been doing exactly that. First, he sends Alleras the Sphinx over to the Citadel to intercept Sam because he had been watching Sam with the glass candle. And then right after the scene we just read, he commands Sam to tell him the entire story of his time in the North, saying, I know much of it and more, but some small parts may have escaped my notice. So, at some point after Dany returned dragons to the world, Marwyn apparently got his candle lit and has been using it to keep an eye on all the goings-on at the Wall and anywhere else in the world that has something to do with the end times, to the point that he already knows most of what Sam could possibly tell him. As for entering someone's dreams and giving them visions, that's exactly what Quaithe has been doing with Dany on multiple occasions. To be honest, all of Dany's dreams are kind of suspect, but the one we can be sure is a Quaithe sending is Dany's dream of fighting her brother Rhaegar's Battle of the Trident, but on dragonback instead of horseback. The troops of Robert Baratheon, the usurper, appear like others, armored in ice, and Dany has a jolly old time melting them with her dragon fire, only to wake up and find Quaithe present in the ship's cabin, and of course she's whispering her mantras about going south to journey north and touching the shadow to reach the light and all the rest. Now, both the mantras and the dream itself seem to be designed to show Dany her future path of fighting the others with dragons. So what we have here essentially is Quaithe giving Dany a kind of two-part lesson, showing her first in the dream and then telling her afterwards. But as I mentioned, the communication is limited and Quaithe only appears for a moment before peacing out. Then in A Dance with Dragons, Dany is atop the Great Pyramid of Meereen and experiences a kind of waking dream, where she alone can see and hear Quaithe walking with her amongst the trees. Quaithe explains that the glass candles are burning again, and that she is essentially projecting herself into Dany's mind. As on the ship, Quaithe appears to be physically in the room, but isn't. And Dany is the only one who can see and hear her. Which leads to a very funny imaginary friend, who are you talking to, Daenerys moment. Ah, yes. So then, in Dany's final A Dance with Dragons chapter, she's wandering sick and delirious out on the Dothraki Sea, as you recall, and she eventually slips into a kind of psychedelic dream where she's floating amongst the stars and they're whirling around her, and then they're taking the form of a mask of starlight, and it is in fact Quaithe's mask, and Quaithe's voice speaking to Dany, literally dispensing the starry wisdom. And once again, the message is the same. Get in touch with your dragon nature, and then go west, meaning to Westeros, and north to touch the light, or you might say, return light to the world. Lightbringer. You may have heard that phrase before. Anyway, now at this point, you may be noticing, as I did, that both of our glass candle users seem to share the same agenda, which is helping Daenerys prepare to face the others in the long night, as is written in ancient books of prophecy in Ashai. I believe this is because both Marwyn and Quaithe are members of Starry Wisdom Cult, and thereby share the same Azor Ahai Prince That Was Promised agenda. Quaithe appearing as a mask of starlight to again dispense starry wisdom in quite a literal fashion just seems very on the nose for Starry Wisdom Cult membership. And of course, Quaithe is from Ashai, where the Starry Wisdom Cult was supposedly founded by the Bloodstone Emperor, and where it is likely still centered or based out of. Marwyn, meanwhile, has been to Ashai to study magic or whatever else. That's where he met Miriam Azdur, for example. And then it is said of Marwyn that he, quote, sacrificed to queer gods at the little sailors' temples down by the wharves. That's relevant because the maesters tell us that Starry Wisdom Cult actually thrives all around the world, but always in port cities, implying that sailors are attracted to Starry Wisdom Cult because it is an astronomy-based religion, and of course sailors navigate by the stars, or at least they did in antiquity. So these visits of Marwyn's to Old Town's weird little sailors' temples are probably Starry Wisdom Cult check-ins, in my opinion. And basically what I'm saying there is that Martin put that detail in there to give us a clue that he is a Starry Wisdom cultist. So that's what I think is going on, despite the fact that the Starry Wisdom Cult was founded by the Bloodstone Emperor, who is remembered as having caused the Long Night in the mythology of the Further East. It seems that the objective of the cult now is helping the prince that was promised prepare for the new long night. So perhaps there was a Starry Wisdom Cult reformation at some point, or maybe they're just dedicated to cleaning up the mess of their founder, the Bloodstone Emperor, or perhaps there's just more about all this that we don't understand, of course. Whatever the truth is, we can see that both Quaithe and Marwyn are using the glass candles, and we can see that they both seem to have a similar agenda about Azor Ahai / the Prince That Was Promised, whom they both see as Daenerys right now, and both have ties to Ashai, where the original Azor Ahai is from, and where the prophecy of his return is also from. As to why Marwyn didn't try to use his candle to contact Sam, or maybe Jon, or maybe Dany directly, as Quaithe has. Well, I think it might be necessary to make physical contact to establish a kind of magical psychic link before you can use a glass candle to invade someone's dreams. And that's based on this passage that you can see on the screen from A Clash of Kings when Dany is in Qarth. So Quaithe, very conspicuously, does this intimate but platonic two-finger tingly touch thing on Dany's arm, and only after that is when the definitive Quaithe dream contact comes. So it seems like Quaithe is kind of marking Dany here, much like the Night King marked Bran by touching his wrist inside the Weirwood dream. And that's on the TV show, obviously. Night King doesn't exist in the books. But yeah, Night King was able to use that ice mark connection to Bran to then break the wards of Bloodraven's cave and invade and put old Bloodraven out of his misery. So if Helaena did use a glass candle on the show to invade Daemon's Weirwood dream, then that would follow this rule as well, since Daemon and Helaena have no doubt had personal contact, even if they haven't shown it on the show. It's not much time, you understand. And while I'm talking about Helaena, I'll just mention that there is in fact no problem with her using a glass candle to invade a Weirwood dream, because of course we see Melisandre using her flame vision to see Bran and Bloodraven, and she thinks that they can see her back, even though they're using Weirwood magic, and she is, of course, using the flame vision magic. So, as we like to say, there's only one astral plane superhighway, even if people are taking different on-ramps. Rounding out our discussion of Starry Wisdom Cult agenda, or at least Marwyn the Mage's agenda, I will again say that it's bloody obvious that Marwyn wouldn't travel halfway around the world to help Dany master her dragons and then bring her back to Westeros to fight against the others without bringing one of the other glass candles that the Citadel has with him. Given how powerful they are, and given how useful they would be to stay in touch with Westeros while you're off in Slaver's Bay, it would just be absolutely insane for Marwyn to leave without taking one. Marwyn is in charge of those things anyway as the Archmaester of the Higher Mysteries, so I really don't think anyone is stopping him from taking another candle out of the display case. They're very dusty, no one uses them. So doing, Marwyn could then communicate back to his glass candle in his study and to any of his acolytes who might be sitting in front of it. Or Marwyn may even be able to contact Sam directly wherever Sam goes, now that he has made physical contact with Sam. That's right, it's right there, you can see it. He's a bit rougher than Quaithe, but it's certainly interesting that George wrote the scene to have Marwyn make physical contact with Sam. That's just how you do it to be sneaky. Nothing more platonic than a get in here slayer. So check out my video Glass Candle Sorceress for more on the Dany glass candle theory. But what it boils down to is Dany increasingly stepping into the role of true Valyrian sorceress, with her learning to use the glass candle being a major part of that. As to what she'll see and do with the candle, well, first of all, presumably she'll be able to communicate a little better with Quaithe and maybe get a little more direct answer on the long night stuff instead of these riddles that she's always throwing at Dany. And of course, it could even be that Quaithe and Marwyn have been in touch with each other via the glass candle. Maybe they tingle-touched in a shy at Starry Wisdom Cult meeting. And so maybe Marwyn will show up in Slaver's Bay with his glass candle, hand it to Dany, and be like, hey, give Quaithe a call. She's waiting to hear from you. Most of all, I believe that Daenerys will see another vision of the gemstone-eyed kingly ghosts from the great empire of the Dawn, whom she saw in her Wake the Dragon dream in a Game of Thrones. As I laid out in my video, Great Empire of the Dawn, Dragon Lords of Ancient Ashai, I believe that Great Empire of the Dawn is really just the name for the ancient Ashai Dragon Lords, whom Septon Barth speculates about having existed and about having been the ancestors of the Valyrians. There's a passage that definitely seems to suggest that Quaithe wants Dany to visit Ashai, so check this out. Dany's wrist still tingled where Quaithe had touched her. "Where would you have me go?" she asked. "To go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. And to touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow." Ashai, Dany thought. She would have me go to Ashai. "Will the Ashai give me an army?" she demanded. "Will there be gold for me in Ashai? Will there be ships? What is there in Ashai that I will not find in Qarth?" "Truth," said the woman in the mask, and bowing, she faded back into the crowd. Now, as it turns out, Martin has said that he did originally plan for this to happen, for Dany to go to Ashai, but changed his mind. And it's a good thing too, because I really don't think we have time for all that. However, a glass candle seems like the obvious way to have Dany travel to Ashai in a much more timely and efficient manner, and she'll still be able to learn whatever truth is waiting for her there in Ashai that Quaithe is talking about. This also has the added benefit of maintaining the mystery around Ashai, which might be diminished if we had to actually sail there and dock and walk around the streets and all that. So, returning to the topic of the ghosts in the faded raiment of kings with Valyrian hair and swords of pale fire and gemstone eyes, which matched 4 out of the 8 listed gemstones for which the emperors of the Great Empire of the Dawn were named, they do seem like the people who would have ancient knowledge about Ashai and dragons. And in a way, they are the ancient truth. Because what Dany really needs to know is what caused the original Long Night, and more importantly, how to fix it. And that story begins with the downfall of the Great Empire of the Dawn and the corruption of their magic by the Bloodstone Emperor. Therefore, I think Dany will use the glass candle that Marwyn is surely bringing to her to contact these pre-Valyrian ancestor spirits and gain the wisdom that she needs for the final part of the story. These Dawn Age Dragonlord ancestor spirits may even still be alive in some sense. They're referred to as ghosts in Dany's vision, so I've always wondered, are they really ghosts? Are they spirits that are lingering somewhere, as opposed to just being figments of the dream or something that Quaithe stuck in there? Dany's never seen anything like them to imagine them in her dream, and they appear in Dany's dream very like Quaithe does, giving Dany dragon-related advice and seemingly guiding her towards her destiny. So this is where that draft of A Feast for Crows and the extended glass candle powers come into play. Michael Talks made an entire video about this, so I'll link to that in the description below. And yeah, a number of things about glass candles are different here. So first of all, the faceless man, formerly known as Jaqen H'ghar and now going by the nickname The Alchemist, instead of having Pate steal a key to the vaults of the Citadel for him, as in the published version, The Alchemist originally had Pate steal the glass candle itself. So that's interesting. It makes us wonder if the objective of the faceless men with that key still is getting a glass candle. Everyone's been talking about, old books of dragon lore, so maybe it's a glass candle they want. In any case, while giving Pate his instructions, the alchemist says this: "The night is dark and full of terrors, and light can keep some fearful things at bay, even death. Fire was at the root of all Valyrian magic. With such candles, men made themselves immortal. Dragon glass burns, but it is not consumed. And so long as the flame lasts, the man whose life is bound to it cannot die." He turned back toward Pate. "The bond did need to be renewed from time to time, with blood." So that's pretty cool, right? And obviously Martin seems to have either scrapped this idea altogether, or else he's going to recycle some more limited version of it in the future that he will reveal to us in one of the books that he's writing. And as you can probably guess, I'm thinking it's the latter option, and that some part of the gemstone-eyed kingly ghosts does linger on with the aid of glass candles, no doubt hidden in the inner sanctum of the Temple of Starry Wisdom, deep in the heart of Asshai. If so, they would presumably be waiting around to give Dany advice about Azor Ahai stuff in the long night. And I think Martin is in fact hinting at this in the form of some of the things that the Undying Ones promised to Dany to try to trick her. So the Undying Ones are not lying to Dany anywhere that I can find, but rather using true visions to try to distract Dany and lull her into a state of complacency and vulnerability so they can vampire her energy away. This climaxes with the vision of the slaves that Dany will eventually help free, lifting their hands to her and saying, "Mysa, Mysa." And of course, that is a thing that actually happens, but still, this is a trick by the Undying, who are waiting to vampire and bite and suck on Dany when Drogon wakes her up and interrupts their whole process. So right before that, the Undying Ones tempted Dany with the vision of beautiful and glorious sorcerers and kings and queens who made some very interesting promises. A kingly man in rich robes rose when he saw her and smiled. "Daenerys of House Targaryen, be welcome. Come and share the food of forever. We are the Undying Ones of Qarth." "Long have we awaited you," said a woman beside him, clad in rose and silver. The breast she had left bare in the Qarthian fashion was as perfect as a breast could be. "We knew you were come to us," the Wizard King said. 1,000 years ago we knew, and we have been waiting all this time. We sent the comet to show you the way." "We have knowledge to share with you," said a warrior in shining emerald armor, "and magic weapons to arm you with. You have passed every trial. Now come and sit with us, and all your questions shall be answered." So I think what the Undying Ones are trying to do here is to tempt Dany with their best memory of what the Great Empire of the Dawn Dragon Lords looked like. Because of course that would be a very appealing enticement to Daenerys, who's already seen one vision of them. And look what they're saying. "Long have we awaited you. We knew you would come to us. We've been waiting 1,000 years. We sent the comet to show you the way. And, oh, by the way, would you like some weapons power-ups and to know the speech of dragons?" So you see what I mean? This is the Undying Ones' Temu version of the Great Empire of the Dawn Dragon Lords, because they are the ones who would know the ancient speech of dragonkind, not some up-jumped warlocks in Qarth drinking black wine. And by the way, shout out to Rivermist Clay for my very cool Moon Meteors, damn it, mug, which has Garth on the bottom. Don't know if you can see this, but... So that raises the question, are the real Ashai Dragonlord ghosts still lingering around somewhere and waiting to give Dany advice on being Azor Ahai Reborn? If so, I'm guessing they're lingering on with the aid of glass candles in Ashai in a kind of more limited version of what Martin was originally thinking of doing with the glass candles. And I'm guessing that Dany will see them in the Winds of Winter when Marwyn gets to Slaver's Bay with his glass candle, and when Dany gets back to Slaver's Bay after rounding up the Dothraki and the Darsh Khaleen and doing all that stallion who mounts the world stuff. After this, Dany and Marwyn and the rest of the Brain Trust will be able to use the glass candle as they sail back to Westeros on Victarion's fleet and maybe stop by Volantis to, burn a few slave masters. So this will allow them to outmaneuver and outwit their various enemies, the various fleets that they may want to avoid. And Dany can even use it to gain information about the others or about Jon Snow, so she knows a little something about him before they meet. Yeah, no, just what we talked about. I gave him just enough to go on, not too much to expose the whole thing. Marwyn, come on, man. How long we been doing this? It's cool, don't worry. All right, talk to you later. Oh, hey there. Sorry, everything's just sort of happening at once here. Let me just carefully put that down here. And, sorry, let me just flip the regular light back on. Oh, gosh. This is so embarrassing. Get my non-regular glasses on. Hey, friends. So, we're back here for part 2. I did get my candle working as well as my regular camera, so a little better resolution here for part 2. Yeah, and, so, there is a mystery going all the way back to 2015, I've been asking this question. Why did the Targaryens leave so much of the cool Valyrian stuff in Valyria? The Targaryens seem to have left basically anything having to do with blood magic back in Valyria and did not reproduce those practices on Dragonstone or in Westeros. Now, I believe the answer is that the Doom was actually an inside job pulled off by Aenar Targaryen and the Faceless Men, essentially because it was the only way to prevent another 5,000 years of horrific Valyrian slavery and genocide. And this would be something of a parallel to Elric of Melniboné, who brought about the destruction of his own nation of corrupt dragon lords who absolutely were the inspiration for the Valyrians. You can find out more about that in the videos The Doom Was an Inside Job and The Doom Was an Abolition, but the crux of the hypothesis is that Aenar did not help bring about the Doom so that he be the only Dragon Lord left, because basically all he did after that was sit on Dragonstone and chill. He didn't conquer or assert his dragon dominion over anyone. And like I was saying, they left all the worst practices of Valyrian sorcery behind, save for incest, obviously, which isn't really sorcery, it's just kind of... Anyway, the point is, they don't continue to make Valyrian steel, which almost certainly requires human sacrifice. The Targaryens don't ever use any of those Valyrian dragonbinder horns, such as Euron has, and those too seem to require human sacrifice and might even make slaves of the dragons. And the Targaryens certainly do not mate humans to animals to create weird human-animal hybrids, such as they did at Gogassos. The Targaryens definitely don't do that. Most of all, the Targaryens don't practice slavery, which was the main atrocity of the Valyrian freehold. Now, it is true that Aenar Targaryen was said to have brought all of his, quote, wives, slaves, dragons, siblings, kin, and children with him when he moved to Dragonstone. But since slavery is outlawed in Westeros, and since we never hear of any slaves on Dragonstone at any point in history, it's logical to assume that those sorts of household slaves and servants, who would have been housekeepers and washerwomen and butlers and even tutors and things like that, it's logical to assume that they simply became the small folk of Dragonstone. Because certainly if Aenar or any other subsequent Targaryen had been like rounding up locals and feeding them into the mines of Dragonstone to mine dragonglass or whatever else, we would have heard about that. Such as when Black Heron was capturing local people in the Riverlands and forcing them, enslaving them, and forcing them to build Harrenhal for about 40 years. All of which is to say, glass candles are very bright, and you should definitely have special sunglasses. I'm still kind of blank. No, they would have made a good technology for the Targaryens to to keep from Valyria, if in fact they were leaving that other stuff behind for reasons of moral objections, which is just my theory. That may not be the case. It could also be that the Targaryens didn't have access to dragonbinder horns or how to make Valyrian steel or mate humans and animals, and all they had was their war dragons, and so that's what they took. But the other possibility is that they chose to leave all that stuff behind, and if that's the case, I don't see why they wouldn't have kept the candles. You might have to cut your hand a little bit to light them, but they don't seem to require human sacrifice, so there's no real moral issue with them, and they are so very useful. Also worth pointing out, the technology never actually went extinct, since the Citadel has had their glass candles since before the Doom up until the present day. Dragonstone is also literally a volcanic mountain full of mines of dragon glass, as you can see in this quote here from Stannis. He's talking about boulder-sized chunks and ledges of dragon glass, and he even tells us that it comes in a variety of colors, such as green and red and purple. One of the Citadel's glass candles is in fact green, so seems like the color doesn't matter. They all work for magical purposes, and I would personally like a green one. That would be cool. All I have is this generic black dragon glass candle, so, you know, maybe one day. In other words, there's really nothing stopping the Targaryens from making a new glass candle, even if they didn't bring any with them, and even if they didn't want to borrow any from the Citadel, they could have just made some. And so I propose that they did have them, either from Valyria or new ones that they made or whatever. Yeah, the Targaryens, it just makes too much sense that they would have. So, are there any hints of the post-Doom Targaryens using glass candles in the story? You know, any little mysteries that could be solved through the use of glass candles? Well, Aegon's huge painted table that depicts the land of Westeros, I mean, that's a giveaway for an astral projection visualization guide tool. I mean, it's obvious. This is something that Aegon and Visenya would have used on their spirit flights over Westeros, which I think is really the only thing they enjoyed doing together, actually, besides burning castles. And I'm mostly kidding here, but not totally. I mean, it would have worked for that. I don't do astral projection, but I mean, who knows? Who knows? But no, the serious clue is the Dornish Letter mystery, as I said at the top of the video. Thanks for humoring my dumb humor. I'll get to the point now. So to sum up, the year is 13 AC. It's 4 years after the death of Queen Rhaenys and her dragon Meraxes at the Hellholt in Dorne. The newish ruling prince of Dorne, Nymor Martell, sent a peace delegation to King's Landing headed by his daughter and heir, Daria Martell. Aegon was about to refuse the Dornish offer, which was essentially, you know, piss off and leave us alone, unbowed, unbent, etc., when Daria handed Aegon the mysterious Dornish letter. Aegon was so angered as he read it that he gripped the Iron Throne too hard and cut his hand, as you could see, and this is the only record of Aegon being cut by the Iron Throne. We have no idea what was in the letter, that's the big mystery, but an equally big, if not bigger mystery is this next part, what Aegon did after reading the letter. He immediately hopped on the back of Balerion the Black Dread and flew straight to Dragonstone, only to return to King's Landing the next day and agree to the Dornish proposal, which again was piss off, we are Dorne, etc. So it's kind of a two-part mystery, not only what was in the letter, but what did Aegon do on Dragonstone and what did he learn there that changed his mind. You can see a few ideas that the Maesters have about what was in the letter on the screen here, and I'm not sure which, if any of these are right, or if there's little elements of truth in each suggestion, which is often how George does his mysteries. But I think that the idea of a glass candle on Dragonstone is one piece of the puzzle, because if the Targaryens kept glass candles on Dragonstone, then it would make perfect sense that Aegon might suddenly fly back there for one night only, and then come back with a totally new outlook and position on this political issue, almost as if he had, learned something or verified something. Whatever was in the letter obviously made Aegon angry, so most people think it was some kind of threat, one which Aegon, according to my theory, was able to verify with a glass candle on Dragonstone, and one which he then decided to take seriously, as he essentially agreed to stop trying to conquer Dorne and treat them instead as an independent realm after his trip to Dragonstone. Now, I'm not saying there can't be any other reason for the Dragonstone trip. Maybe he just wanted to consult with Visenya, although that seems like something the Maesters just would have said flat out. But yeah, maybe there's some other reason that I haven't thought of, but the glass candle is a pretty good reason, so I do want to propose that for you Dornish Letter mystery enthusiasts. I think whatever was in the letter, it makes sense that he might have gone to Dragonstone to verify it, if it was a threat about Rhaenys or some faceless man thing. And if the Targaryens did keep glass candles, it makes sense that they only would have had him on Dragonstone and not in King's Landing because obviously the Maesters didn't hear about it. So if this theory is right, it was a secret, and thus maybe only on Dragonstone in some inner sanctum, would we find Aegon's glass candle. So apart from that, I'm not really sure if there's any other events in Targaryen history that suggest glass candle use. I haven't actually gone through all of Fire and Blood and sort of, inspected it for mysteries that could be explained by the glass candle. But this is the part where I say, let me know in the comments if you have any ideas about this. The other point I want to make is that, if Aegon had this prophecy about the prince that was promised being a Targaryen, who would face some sort of icy threat from the north, as we know he did, then a glass candle seems like a pretty obvious thing to use to try to learn more about this threat, right? Even though Marwyn the Mage is mostly pretty skeptical of prophecy, there's that whole thing about prophecy and how it'll bite you. You know the saying. He is still using the glass candle to keep an eye on all things related to end times matters. The Wall, the Night's Watch, all that stuff. So how much more motivated would Aegon the Conqueror have been to use a glass candle for similar reasons? Like I said, even if Aenar didn't bring any glass candles with him from Valyria to Dragonstone, there's really nothing stopping Aegon and Visenya from making a new one. Unless there is, maybe there's some lost magical art that they don't know, and that's why I bring up the Citadel's candles. Even if Aegon and Visenya can't make a new one, there's nothing to stop them from knocking on the doors at the Citadel and, knocking. Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. Oh, Guns N' Roses. And borrowing one of their glass candles that they don't use very much. Aegon and his sisters, they definitely have enough pull to borrow a glass candle. And again, the motivation to do so because of Aegon's dream. And so, if Ryan Condal and the House of the Dragon Brain Trust show us Helaena using a glass candle in Season 3, then I will guess that this is something Ryan has talked over with George, and that this reflects some sort of book truth. So even if whatever Helaena does with a candle on the show is show canon only, or even just Helaena using a candle is show canon only, I do think that if we see that, it will be a point in favor of the general idea of Targaryens having glass candles after the doom. All right, it's time to talk about Euron Greyjoy. I've made a few videos about Euron's evil ass, Night's King Greyjoy, Euron King of the Apocalypse, and so on. And I'm also going to make another Euron video soon about exactly how he plans to trick Victarion with the Dragonbinder horn. But what I have for you today is a little Winds of Winter predictions theory. I did mention this in my Origins of Old Town video all the way at the end, but apart from that, I don't think you will have heard this theory anywhere else. So let's start with the more widely accepted idea that Euron is using a glass candle, and then I'll tell you about what I think he's doing with it. For starters, it sure seems like this guy Euron Nightwalker in Qarth, who uses glass candles, is really just Euron's alias that he's been using before he came back to the Iron Islands. What you're seeing on screen here is a list of strange goings-on in Qarth that Xaros Owen Daxos is telling Dany about. Strange goings-on that seem to be a result of Dany's dragons having boosted all magic in the world and just sort of sent everything haywire. Now, the thing is, Euron is also the name of an Ironborn king with very clear and strong parallels to Euron, and that would be Euron the Fourth Good Brother, also known as Bad Brother. Like Euron, he held a king's moot without one of the strongest claimants to the throne of the Iron Islands. Euron held one without Theon, and Euron Good Brother held one without one of the previous king's sons, Torgon Greyiron. Euron Good Brother then put all of the old king's sons to death as soon as he was crowned, which that's how he got the nickname Bad Brother. And Euron, of course, has actually murdered several of his own brothers, who are also the old king's sons, quote unquote. And of course, Aeron Damphair is next on the list. Bad Brother's Kingsmoot was eventually declared null and void after a couple years of misrule and after Torgon returned, resulting in Euron's ouster and the crowning of King Torgon Greyiron the Latecomer, which has led many people in the fandom to speculate that Theon will have a similar ending. Euron's kingship will be declared null and void, and Theon will be named king, and he'll be King Theon the Latecomer. The point for today is that this parallel between Euron Good Brother and Euron Greyjoy sure seems like a strong clue that Euron Greyjoy is Euron Nightwalker, that's his alias, when he's hanging out in Qarth. Euron would have needed a base of operations somewhere out east during his years of exile from the Iron Islands, and knowing his rich tastes, Qarth seems to fit. The other clue that Euron is Euron Nightwalker, user of glass candles, is that he shows up, I think it's like 2 days after Balon dies to, make a claim for the throne. And some of you might say, oh, big deal, he hired the faceless man that killed Balon, which I actually just explained in the Summer Hall video that came out a couple weeks ago. Thanks everyone for watching that. But the thing is, you can't schedule a faceless man killing that tightly. So, for example, Jaqen H'ghar explains to Arya that if she had asked him to kill King Joffrey, he would have done it. He would have put one foot in front of the other, and sooner or later, the king would have died, but it might have taken as long as a year. So essentially, the faceless men, they don't just, kill recklessly. They lay careful plots, and they're patient, and they lay in the cut and wait for the opportunity to arise, and then they work their magic. So it doesn't really seem like there would have been a way for Euron to know exactly what day they would have gotten some servant to work their way into Pike and push Balon off the rope bridge. But obviously, if Euron's got a glass candle, then he can pretty much watch it go down and know exactly when to show up. Another part of Euron's story that would be well explained by use of a glass candle is the way that he sort of invades Aeron Damphair's mind and dreams in the Forsaken chapter. Aeron, as you'll recall, is delirious and starved from his imprisonment already, and then Euron force feeds him Shade of the Evening on 2 different occasions, each time appearing in his dreams in various monstrous and symbolic forms, and speaking directly to Aeron throughout the dream, just as Quaithe does in Dany's dreams. Now, I don't really see that just getting Aeron high on Shade of the Evening would be enough to accomplish this. That would make him susceptible to suggestion, sure, but how is Euron projecting himself into Aeron's mind like that? Now, it may be that all Euron has to do is drink some Shade of the Evening too, and then he can pull this off, but it doesn't really make sense to me just because Euron is so dominant in Aeron's visions and even seems to really craft them entirely. Just like Quaithe is seemingly crafting that trident dream just to show Dany what she's got to do, fight the others with dragons. Euron is also following up his dream lessons, or I guess you might say Euron god propaganda, with in-person reinforcement, which is kind of the same technique that Quaithe is doing. Yet another Euron plot point explained by a glass candle. How is he keeping an eye on Victarion, whom he obviously plans to trick? Because I have to say, theories about Euron skin changing the dusky woman so he can have sex with his brother have never really sat right with me. I mean, they shouldn't sit right with anybody, but they never seemed really true to me. We don't even know that Euron can skin change people, and when you do skin change people, it looks kind of crazy like Thistle or Hodor. Anyway, I think it makes a lot more sense that he's using a candle to keep an eye on Victarion, and Moqorro's flame vision glimpse of Euron also sounds like he's watching everybody with a glass candle. So Tyrion is asking Moqorro about all the things and people coming to Slaver's Bay for Dany, and if he can see them in the flames. And he responds,
"Only their shadows," Moqorro said. "One most of all, a tall and twisted thing with 1 black eye and 10 long arms, sailing on a sea of blood."
So that sounds like, it sounds like Moqorro's been smoking heavily. But he is a R'hllor priest, so I figure that's what they sound like. No, it sounds like Euron, right? He's got the 1 black eye shining with malice, and tall and twisted is the exact description of the candle in Marwyn's chambers. So yeah, it sounds like Euron is watching them with his black eye through the candle, which is kind of like a single black eye itself. So those are all the ways and signs that Euron is using a glass candle. Now, the other piece of the puzzle is, of course, Lord Leyton Hightower and his daughter Melora the Mad Maid, who are famously atop the High Tower consulting books of spells, which may or may not involve summoning armies from the deeps in preparation for Euron's coming attack on Old Town. I'm almost certain that I'm not the first person to suggest that they may have a glass candle up there, as the entire setup just seems like too strong of a parallel to Saruman and his Palantir atop the Tower of Orthanc. Tens of thousands. The High Towers are the protectors of the Citadel and obviously the center of power in Old Town. So it's certainly not hard to imagine that any Lord Hightower could access one of the Citadel's candles. And it's also not hard to imagine the High Towers simply having one of their own up there. Perhaps they put in an order for one when the Citadel got theirs, like, hey, I'm going to Valeria. You need anything while I'm at the store? They have glass candles in stock. Now, as we know, and spoiler alert for Lord of the Rings, Saruman was corrupted through his use of the Palantir, which put him in contact with the Eye of Sauron. The Eye of Sauron, which seems to be the inspiration for Euron's sigil. That's right. So I am proposing that Leyton has been in contact with Euron through his use of the glass candle, and that Leyton will actually throw open the gates for Euron instead of having the wizard battle that some people have been predicting. I think Leyton may turn out to be in league with Euron, and that he will even preside over Euron's coronation as King of Westeros, just as the first Targaryen kings were crowned in Old Town. That's right, instead of hating, Leyton will be coronating. And this will actually be in keeping with what the Hightowers always do. Instead of fighting the Targaryens, they threw open the gates and coronated them, and that happened on more than one occasion. So too for the Andals when they first invaded and made their way to the Reach. The Hightowers chose to marry their daughters to the Andal kings and adopt the ways of the faith instead of fighting them, even making a home for the faith right there in Old Town. So nice of them. That's right, build your church right here, guys. No, seriously, right here, where we can keep an eye on things. So kind. Even going back to the First Men's invasion of Westeros, the pattern may still hold, because there is, after all, quite a lot of evidence that the Hightowers are not First Men, and actually arrived in Westeros before the First Men. Check out my Origins of Old Town video for that story, that according to the Maesters, the Hightowers are kings from their first glimpse in the pages of history, and so if they are not First Men, then they maintained that kingship through the arrival of the First Men, and thus must have co-opted instead of confronted. And so yeah, basically I think that's going to happen one more time when Euron arrives in Old Town. And I think the glass candle will be revealed as the means by which Euron either corrupted Leyton or just coordinated with him. This works very well with the idea that the mysterious Hands of White Fire lady, the tall shadow in woman's form that Aaron sees in his Shade of the Evening nightmare vision of Euron, that she is none other than the Mad Maid Malor Hightower. Appearing next to Euron implies some sort of cooperation and coordination, so yeah, perhaps the glass candles are being used to make all that happen. As to whether Euron or Lord Leyton are members of Starry Wisdom Cult, well, that does seem like a possibility. I would guess that Euron at least has had some contact with them, especially if he has really been to Asshai, as he claims. However, I don't really see Euron submitting to anyone else's agenda, so maybe he just sort of dropped in for a few months and then spun out, and now he's kind of a heretic. Who knows? But he definitely sees himself as the chosen one and not Daenerys. I do want to point out, though, that Euron is the only one to refer to Daenerys as having amethyst eyes, which is kind of a match for the Amethyst Empress of the Great Empire of the Dawn, and that could be an indication that Euron sees himself more as a Bloodstone Emperor reborn, that he wants Dany, his Amethyst Empress, for a blood sacrifice ritual. It's the only reason Euron ever wants anybody, basically. And it's possible that that is the Starry Wisdom Cult agenda, so yeah. Now, Leyton, he obviously could be a member too. Maybe he's been corrupted away from the true path by Euron. Or again, maybe this is all part of Starry Wisdom Cult agenda. Euron being crowned king and then, marrying Daenerys. Although I have to say, if Quaithe is steering Daenerys towards a marriage with Euron, I'm going to be pissed. Because Quaithe, I've been defending you, so don't let me down. But kidding aside, it is obviously possible. Starry Wisdom Cult agenda is basically either helping Dany and Jon, whoever is Azor High Reborn, defeat the others, or it's helping Euron become some sort of new demonic god king. It's one of those two. And then finally, some of you may be wondering, hey, was Euron using a glass candle to enter Dany's dream, the one where she's sleeping with Hisdar, and he sort of morphs into a warlock with blue lips and an icy, naughty bits made of ice. And that could be the case, although if we're going on the two-finger touch theory, Euron hasn't made contact with Dany. That may not be, true. We don't know. But I would actually guess that this is not Euron's invasion, but rather Dany's own psychic dream warning her of Euron, who's their plots are coming together, and so her dreams are warning her of Euron, but I don't think that's Euron's invasion. Dany is kind of being corralled into marrying Hisdar, whom she does not love and almost certainly should not trust, so perhaps this is a plot parallel thing, and the same thing will happen with Euron, whom Dany also should not trust, but may have political and military reasons to marry. Because, of course, not only does Euron have control of the Ironborn and their fleet, but if he's taken Old Town and declared himself king of Westeros, then, he's bringing a lot to the table. We don't really have time to speculate on how all the Dany Euron stuff will fall out, but I just wanted to say that, yeah, I don't think that's a glass candle incident. I think that is actually Dany's psychic dream warning of Euron. But again, let me know in the comments what you think. All right, friends. Well, I gotta go. I've got a phone call here, so, Starry Wisdom Cult stuff. It's very urgent. But thanks for watching. Make sure you leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time. Yes, no, I told you. Come on, man.